Before break, we read chapter 8, Badges. And in this chapter, if you remember, Ted goes to the grocery store and he is buying things at this E&A market. And the cash register worker, Ruby, is a little bit suspicious of Ted because he's buying things that normally he wouldn't, and things that his mom would probably not buy. And she sort of questions him, but he's doing a really good job because he tells her that he needs to be prepared because he's a Boy Scout. So he kind of fools her. And he's buying the things actually for Alexa and the family and for to give to them. And so he is going to go over to April's and give the stuff, and he also knows he's going to meet her mom today. And so chapter 9 is called Alexa. April is wearing a different shirt now, blue and white, long sleeves with a NASCAR picture on the front and a Texas Motor Speedway written across the back. So it was a shirt, and it was a cool clue too. Ted also noticed that this shirt wasn't much cleaner than the one with the frowning smiley face had been. He remembered how dirty his own clothes had been when he'd come back after a week at the 4-H camp. It's hard to stay clean when you're away from home. Ted followed April through the cellar and up the stairs. The kitchen was empty except for a wooden packing crate in one corner with a red backpack sitting on top of it. On the floor beside the crate was a sleeping bag folded in half with the corner of a pink pillowcase poking out the top. Ted realized he was looking at April's bedroom. The place didn't smell very good. Not horrible, just not fresh. It looked like someone had tried to clean the area a little. But you need a broom and a mop and clean water to spruce up a kitchen. And the windows that'll open to let in some air. April pointed to the kitchen counter. You can put your bag there. Come on into the front room. Ted was surprised to see there was some furniture in the living room. There was a gray and white mattress on the floor over by the staircase, and someone had left a rolled-up sleeping bag on it. In the far corner, there was a recliner chair with stuffing coming out where the vinyl was ripped. That looked like another sleeping area, probably the little brother's. In the corner to his right, Ted saw a jumble of things that the Andersons hadn't bothered to take with them. It was the sort of stuff that sits by the road after a garage sale with a sign that says free. A lamp with a torn shade, 2 shopping bags full of baby clothes, a ripped black and red checkered board, 3 or 4 battered aluminum pots and pans, some paperback books that had gotten wet, a card table with one bent leg. Ted also saw the things April's family had brought with them. 2 small plastic suitcases, one pink, one bright blue, and a large dark green duffel bag. It wasn't much. Mama, this is Ted. Alexa walked over and took Ted's hand. Well, I'm pleased to make your acquaintance. April tells me you're a very nice young man. We sure appreciate what you brought us. Real kind of you. And April said you promised you wouldn't tell anybody we were here. Is that right? Ted nodded. Yes, ma'am. Pleased to meet you, too. Her hand felt cold. April's mom didn't look like any criminal Ted had ever read about or seen on TV. She seemed tiny, hardly an inch taller than he was. She had pale yellow hair, too yellow to be real, and when Ted looked in her face, he mostly saw her eyes, big, brown and big. But Ted could see what April had meant about her mom being scared. Her eyes were sort of shaky, and the smile didn't seem natural. Even so, it was a friendly smile, and her teeth were bright white, almost like they had been painted. She had on jeans and a baggy, pale green sweater pulled up to her elbows. Her hands were long and thin, with the pink fingernail polish mostly worn off. She wasn't much like the moms Ted knew around town. and she wasn't scary at all. It was hard to imagine her breaking the law. Still, every detective knows you can't just go by the way things look. Alexa waved her hand at the room around them. Sorry I can't offer you a cold drink and make you feel at home, but we're kind of roughing it. After an awkward pause, she said, This is Artie. Artie, say hi to Ted. April's little brother was lying on his sleeping bag near a patch of light coming through a broken board on one of the front windows. He kept reading his X-Men comic book. He was thin, same as April, except he had blonde hair instead of brown, wearing jeans and a red t-shirt, no socks, no shoes. In a sharper tone, Alexa said, Artie, I said, say hi to Ted here. Artie waited another 3 seconds. Then he looked up, put a fake-looking smile on his face and said, Hi, and went right back to his reading. Artie wasn't about to pretend that he was having a good time. Ted said, I brought some more food and things. Probably not near enough, but, well, I wasn't sure how long you were going to be here. Ted hoped saying that would get her talking about her plans, but Alexa just smiled and said, I'm sure whatever you brought'll be just fine, and that reminds me, here's some money. She dug into the front pocket of her jeans and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. Ted started to say no, but Alexa grabbed his hand and pushed the money into his palm. She said, Now, I know this isn't near enough, but we don't want to be any more of a burden than we have to be. Ted said, Thank you, ma'am, and he decided then and there that Alexa hadn't robbed any banks recently. Alexa smiled again and said, And I'm going to keep count so I can pay you back just as soon as I get to an ATM, because we've got money, believe it or not. Everybody had run out of things to say. So Ted said, Well, I've got to get going. I've got chores at home. And right away he wished he hadn't said at home. It seemed unkind. Alexa nodded. I understand. I grew up on a ranch down near El Paso, and chores won't wait, will they? April will walk you out. You two probably have things you want to talk about anyway. Ted cringed when she said that, but he smiled and said, Well, so long. Turning away, Ted thought, Why do moms always say that? What in the world would I have to say to some girl? Except that I do have a ton of questions for her. As a detective, Ted had plenty to talk about and ask, because so far, everybody was acting like he should just stop by with food now and then and pretend like it was almost natural thing, like it was the most natural thing in the world for a mom and 2 kids to be hanging out in an empty house. In the kitchen, Ted began pulling the supplies out of his bag. That's when he noticed an old cast iron pump on the drain board at the sink. His kitchen had one of those too. He nodded at it and said, You know, that could fix your water problem here. April shook her head. Almost wore out my hands trying it, just making a hissing sound. A lot can break and wear out around a farm, and Ted had always watched and asked questions when his dad was fixing things. He said gaskets probably dried out. He opened the gallon bottle of spring water, raised a curved pump handle, and then poured a cup or 2 into the hole where the round rod went into the top of the casing. That'll swell up the gasket. In about 15 minutes, pour in another cup, and then pump it 20 or 30 times real fast. Just might work. And if it doesn't, I'll bring some tools and put on a new gasket. Bucket of water's all you need to make a bathroom work. That's what we do if our power goes out. Because if you have plenty of water, it'll be a lot easier. Then he added, in case you were planning to stay a while. Ted let that thought hang in the air a few seconds, then picked up his canvas bag and said, Well, gotta go. April followed him down the stairs and then through the basement and out into the backyard. As he picked up his bike, she said, It's nice of you not to ask a lot of questions. She started to turn toward the house and then stopped. April began talking, and it was like she wanted to get it all out in one breath. My dad is a soldier, and he got killed in Iraq. That was about a month ago. Then this army friend of his tried to come and move in with us because he thinks he loves my mom. We called the police, and he stopped bothering, but Mama was upset. and mostly just sad, and she decided we had to go to Colorado to her sister's. That's why we left Texas. In the middle of the night, the car started smoking real bad back in Kansas, and then it just stopped. We got a ride from a lady in a big RV, but she said she had to turn north about 3 miles up the road. So we saw the sign and we started walking toward town, and it was dark, and then we came here to ask for a phone because my mom's cell phone's dead. Ended up coming inside, and that's when my mom got scared and started thinking Lauren might be tracking us. That's the guy's name, back in Texas. Except he isn't tracking us because Lauren couldn't track a cockroach in a bucket, but Mama decided to just stay put for a while anyway. April shrugged. That's it. That's all there is. Then she added, but my mom's not sick or anything. She's just scared is all. And with Daddy gone, it's extra hard now on everybody. You saw Artie. He's mad and he's got a mean mouth on him too. Ted didn't know what to say. It was a lot to deal with. All of a sudden, he felt like he was in a movie about some homeless people, but it wasn't a movie. It was happening right in his own town, and he was in the middle of it. He had to say something. Well, I'm glad I can help out, and I'm glad it was me who saw you instead of somebody else. April nodded and said, me too. Then she smiled. And Ted the detective made a mental note that April had just smiled her first real smile. He climbed on his bike and he rode out along the overgrown front drive. Ted was still thinking about that smile and thinking about April's story too, which were the wrong things to be thinking about at that moment. Ted should have been thinking about the car that was coming up the hill from town. As he reached the old mailbox, the car was right there, and Ted looked up. So did the driver, and then the driver waved and smiled at him. The car was a dark blue Chevy Cavalier, license plate number PL7865, and the driver was Ted's teacher, Mrs. Mitchell.